Well, hello, everybody. I'm looking forward to getting started. Thanks for joining us this afternoon or this morning, depending on where you're at. Welcome to week 10 of the Financial Roundtables for Schools. Glad you joined us. Money's not the most important thing in life, but it is like oxygen and the gotta have it scale. So this is a time to come together to address topics that I think are relevant for all of us. And money can be something that keeps us up at night. Maybe it does keep you up at night. Maybe it did. It certainly kept the person up at night that was our guest earlier today on a salon roundtable. More on that later. But anyway, we're looking for and hope that you have some light bulb moments today. Schools obviously are a critical part of the ecosystem, which is why we started this roundtable, and super excited to be doing this. Shout out to sponsors. Qnity, of course, is lead sponsor on this and curator. We have just launched a new course called Money by Qnity. It's a financial success training program with money skills for students that helps make what's complicated, confusing, and overwhelming into something very simple and visual that really meets students where they're at. Only 25% of students and 20% of parents feel they're prepared to deal with financial challenges that await them, and we are here to help with that. Heads up, we are going to be having a free intro session next Monday on the 23rd at 3 p.m. Central Time. You can go to our website, qnityforschools.com, to register for this. We'd love to have you. Also, Erin is in the chat here, so she can put something in the chat if you want to be part of that. So you can also book a demo, qnityforschools.com. Pivot Point, awesome sponsor. I know we have several members of the Pivot Point team on here. They're so professional, so smart, and they're great partners as we launch this course. We get to feature one of Pivot Point's own today. I've been dying to have a conversation with Daniel ever since I saw him do a presentation on August 1st. Lightheart Sanders also is a sponsor of this, CPAs. And again, we're looking for light bulb moments today. We did furnish a 9-grid that'll help capture some of your ideas from this. It should have been in the email invite. The 9-grid is one of our visual thinking tools, and it's there for you to use today. This week's guest, which we'll get to in a minute here, is Daniel Dunworth from Pivot Point. We'll go through his background and all of that very shortly. Last week, and Jared, if I saw you on the call, Jared, if you could come off mic, if that's possible. We're pulling an audible here. But last week, actually it was 2 weeks, we took last week off. I was on vacation. Thank you very much. I missed all of you. But the reason why I want Jared to possibly come off mic is because Jared is in the middle of doing a benchmarking program that is available whether you're a client of Lightheart Sanders or not. So let me see if we can do this. Jared, if we can get you off mic, maybe you can just say real quick. Actually, I got a better idea here. Jared, if it's all right with you, go ahead, put in the chat information how people could participate in your benchmarking program that you and your firm are undertaking, okay? So Jared, request for you, please put in the chat, because I wholeheartedly endorse opportunities to benchmark, because that type of financial intelligence, I think, is really important. And Jared, thank you to you and your firm for doing that. So what Jared covered last week was insights and data from a school benchmark study. And so just a little bit about that. All right. Now, earlier this morning, we had our 55th double nickels roundtable for salons and spas. I think this morning's session was very powerful. It was a story about To Hell and Back, a business that has been in deep distress, and how they got out of distress to where they're at today. And those recordings are posted on our YouTube channel. So certainly we want you to have access to that. So Daniel, let's have you come off mic. And I've got your bio up on the screen here. I don't expect everybody to read it, but you got an impressive background, my friend. How are you?
I'm doing well, Tom. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here for the roundtable.
So 15 years. And when you and I were doing some prep, I was very impressed with your background. We're going to come off of this and just be eye to eye here. So give us your background in your own terms and what your role is today, please.
Certainly. I've been in the school side of business from all the way down to being an educator it's actually getting just a touch closer to 20 years now. So I'm always excited about that. I started out as an educator, progressed my way through into becoming a school director, multi-school director. I started dabbling in some corporate training. And from there, it brought me into about 8 years ago, my role with Pivot Point now, where I began as a field educator, really doing a lot of direct support with schools. And as of right now, I serve as the Learning Engagement and Development Senior Manager. So not only do I continue to support our awesome partners in education, but I also have an opportunity to support in developing continuing education for educators, schools, owners, and salons.
So it's a great background. It's a great role. Thank you for your work. And so August 1st, you did not one, but two presentations for CEA. And you did one that was titled Transform Ed. So what a year of virtual learning taught us. And then you did another one, Coaching in Creative Classrooms. So you double dipped, you did two presentations, and I was just sitting there kind of along for the ride as you just led us through two journeys together. And I thought it was really powerful content. And I know as an educator that you do an event like this, August 1st, and you're able to now step back. So when you and I talked about this, it's not so much about just redoing your presentation, but it's also getting a little bit of behind the scenes, because I know that doing something like that requires a lot of preparation. And you were quick to acknowledge how many months it took to prepare that information, the research, how much effort, and then also as a team effort. So let's talk about that just a little bit, okay?
Absolutely. Both the presentations we did at CEA were something that's it's kind of always a work in process. And the team I worked with, we really started diving into it several months before CEA. So I've got to definitely give credit where credit's due. While I get the pleasure of being the face of some of those sessions, I'm definitely not a lone wolf with it. Amazing team to help out with it. And what we really explored during that time were some concepts that have been resonating, I think, quite strongly through education. And also really starting to set those kind of shifts and pivots that are happening now and going to continue happening. But getting a chance to step back, like you mentioned, gives me a chance, of course, to identify what are some of those things that I'd love to improve. I think as an educator, you're naturally looking for some new opportunities, but to also really kind of just have it resonate that events like that take place. It's phenomenal. And I love the chance to connect. Fortunately, we were able to do it virtually this year, same as last year, but I always look forward to those ones being the nice, strong face-to-face opportunities too.
So we have a different audience. The audience for CEA is more instructors, and This is going to be owners and managers. And so what I asked you to do is it's pretty unlikely that anybody in this call would have been part of the CEA event. And so given our audience here, one of the things I was hoping to gather are what would be some things that you would feel are like big takeaways. Well, first of all, start out with your first presentation, so make it relevant for our audience today, please.
Absolutely. As owners, managers, whatever that role may necessarily be, is knowing that those cultures that you really oversee and establish are going through some pretty dynamic changes. Not only with the individuals that are coming in and out of them, the individuals and the role that they're taking on to support those learners. I kind of think of it that our learners are our number one guests. Just like in our salon and spa worlds, we have guests, and our priority is to make them happy and help them accomplish what they're looking for. Educators support learners doing the same thing. And as an owner, my goal is to make sure that my team has the tools to be successful and to support success. Transformed Ed was really about looking at this journey we've been on that has quite honestly been close to a decade in the making, if not a bit more, moving towards technology and all of the kind of empowerment that comes with that, and the resources that we can use, and understanding that our journey, while it pivoted overnight about a year and a half ago, it's going to continue pivoting, and there's always going to be a little bit of shift that happens.
Yeah, that was something that really came out when I stepped back with you, is that this has been going on for a while. But I mean, we probably had 10 years of acceleration, or 5 years with the pandemic. So it pushed us further. And that's something the pandemic has done. It's been accelerated for a lot of different things. And so there was something help educators rally together. So one of the purposes of that, the CEA, was to really create community and create conversation around that, right?
Absolutely. It's, getting something like CEA, and I think just as much as like these roundtables do, it's getting an opportunity to connect with everyone else that's kind of walking in your shoes too. We get a chance to rally together as a community and find out, hey, my pain points might be your pain points, and your successes could also equally be my successes. And, that's looking even at that transform session, is knowing that we've all went through that shift together. We've all been progressing through that. And how do we continue to just make it happen? Because it's actually a good thing when it happens.
One of the ahas that I got from you is that there's just an assumption that face-to-face, in-person education has a higher level of engagement. But you kind of woke my mind up a little bit to that actually virtual can result in, you got a fan, by the way, Daniel's the best. So that
Thanks, Diane.
Virtual actually can create higher engagement than FaceTime. Let's talk about that for a little bit.
Yeah, there's an analogy I like to think about. When you go to a party, what family, friends, whatever it might be, there's that point in time where everybody starts to settle in, and you realize that, slowly you start to notice more people. They're in the room together, but they've all kind of broken out onto their phones. And that same kind of sensation is almost what can happen in your learning environments. Is assuming that everyone gets together means that they're all going to get together, and everyone's going to, kind of have these strong conversations and dialogue that take place. And sometimes that assumption is there in the learning environments too, that because my learner is right there in front of me, that means I have their utmost attention and they're there engaged with me. Might not always be the case. Sometimes their brain has wandered somewhere else, they're distracted, or they're thinking a little bit differently. Virtual education gives us the opportunity to have these kind of manageable moments, these measurable moments, these interactions that can be very one-to-one, that sometimes aren't available in face-to-face group settings. While there's always a little bit of give and take that goes to both sides, virtual, I think, has definitely explored opportunities of how we can really connect with our learners. And those connections build into those strong relationships, and they make them cheerleaders for our classrooms, makes them cheerleaders and advocates for our schools, because they become part of a culture in a way that they might not have been able to in a larger group setting.
You put together some words when we spent a little bit of time prep, and you just used those words again, slightly different. And I wrote this down and put quotation marks. You talked about measurable opportunities, and just now you talked about measurable moments. I'm really intrigued with the marriage of those two words. Let's unpack those a little bit, okay? Measurable moments and measurable opportunities, because in the school business, we've got to measure, right?
Absolutely. It's a big part of what we do in the school environment is ensuring that our learners are reaching these milestones that help signal when they're transitioning from one portion of their program to the next, when they're ready to take on new tasks. Again, in a larger group setting or classroom environment, there's a lot of that management that's being done by the educator to sometimes have to just physically or mentally keep track of it. And, there's one thing I didn't mention to you, but we mentioned during the presentation, this idea of letting technology do what technology does best and humans do what humans do best. These measurable moments and these measurable engagements that take place, technology can help us track when a learner has completed a task, when they've asked a question and it's there, even though we might have missed it in a conversation that took place. There's these engagements that technology can help us bring to the surface. I think about those learners that sometimes they're a little bit more introverted. They kind of fall to the back of the groups. They don't ask that question out loud. They don't raise their hand right away. With technology, it opens up an opportunity for them to ask that question and it just be there when an answer is ready, to participate in an activity and not have to put themselves kind of in that hot seat of attention and all eyes are on me. That technology gives us that kind of trackability that can help also increase engagement by providing tools to learners that they might not have had before.
You mentioned introvert, and something just sparked in my head here, Daniel. We didn't talk about this, but I've always been curious about introversion and extroversion. Okay, and we started to measure it in our classes. When people would go through classes that we would teach, these are professionals or in the field, we ask questions such as, do you feel like you're more introverted or extroverted? And we would describe each. And I was really surprised with the findings. We have, I don't know how many hundreds of people have answered this question. And what we found was there's actually slightly more introverts than extroverts, at least from our measurements. Does that surprise you?
Not really. There's one thing I always like to keep in mind when I think about introvert, extrovert, and it's people can certainly change. I don't find that there's usually many people that are always one or the other. There's something I like to think about. We've taught some classes that, talk about this. Motivation is essentially really kind of what drives a lot of that engagement in the classroom. What's your radio like when you go in and out of work? There's days of the weeks where you come in two wheels blazing into the parking lot. You're ready to go. You don't need coffee, and the radio is really loud. That very same day when work's done, you can go to your car, you start it up, and you're shocked at how loud that radio was. And you've got to turn it back down because now you need your moments of peace. At any point in time, someone might change from being a little bit more extroverted, a little bit more introverted. And sometimes we've got the habit of always assuming that today that student's going to be the same way. Again, not to always drive back to technology, but that technology, those resources, this transformation we've been through have given us the opportunities to be more flexible to that individuality that might happen today versus yesterday, or what tomorrow might be like, or this morning versus this afternoon. Generally, though, in education, I think being a little bit more introverted, it happens early on because so many people are still figuring out what the journey's like.
I feel like we could have a whole conversation about introversion and extroversion, but we won't. I do want to throw a few nuggets in there because we've really taken that topic very seriously, and I've done a lot of reading on it. And there's a term that's called an ambivert, and an ambivert is someone that has a combination of introversion and extroversion. And what we found in studies, there's research to show that ambiverts are the top performers in business. And anyway, one little thing, I'm just going to slip this in. You're the guest, not me, but I got to throw this in. I was always struck because I ran a 400-person salon spa company, and our top performer, we had 7 locations in Minnesota and 1 in California. And it took a while for me to go to California. That's where our top producer was. And I just expected this top producer in a company, a complete legend. No one was even close to her in production. I just expected this outgoing person, and she was just a classic shy introvert from Wisconsin. And it just really stuck with me. So anyway, I feel like we could have a whole conversation about introversion and extroversion. I'm really interested in that topic, and you brought it up. And by the way, I'm going to throw one other thing in here. You and I were chatting a little bit earlier about how you come down from an event like that. And here you had like hours that you were in front of us, and you were like on the whole time. And so you and I have very different ways that we unwind. So why don't you share with the group sort of your ritual, if I can put you in the spot.
You're right. Going into that event, it is a couple of hours on camera. And for anyone that has had to ever present, they know that sometimes that camera energy, it draws a lot than sometimes the face-to-face energy. And while I generally am a bit more of that kind of high energy, extroverted kind of person, when that session ends, I kind of unplug a bit. I really do kind of appreciate a little bit of peace and quiet. Following a big event like that, I grab myself a steak, I throw it on the grill. So I have a little bit of some steak and asparagus that weekend, just to kind of close out that celebration of that event. And I take that moment to just kind of, like you said, unpack. I like to just look at, and I immediately start to think about what went well, but where are some of my opportunities? I'm always looking for, chances to just make things better. And I like to always challenge myself. So I immediately start thinking about, and those that I work with that might be here on the call, they know that I immediately start asking questions of, how are we raising that bar next year or next time? I immediately kind of go into that thought process while I eat my nice medium steak.
All right, your second presentation, this one really intrigued me. Coaching in creative classrooms. Wow, I just love the title, first of all. Let's read that. Learners in the 21st century need an opportunity to claim their own path. The role of the, part of my screen's blocked here, the role of the educator, even more places an emphasis on coaching and mentoring by mindful feedback, another great word combination. Discover key elements and strategies for mindful feedback to promote change and growth for all learners. Okay, let's go through that one for a moment, okay? Really intriguing topic.
Yeah, a couple of key things we talked about there is the idea of what the classroom is also is in a period of redefinement, that a classroom doesn't mean within four walls. Though our creative classrooms now are just as much virtual as they are face-to-face. And what we're really seeing and being able to tackle because of the resources we have is how are we supporting success in those environments? And one of the most critical components that we can do as leaders in those environments, that's what we all are, whether we're an educator, a director, manager, owner, we are leaders in these creative environments with our learners. And coaching and mentoring is some of the best ways that we can encourage more learning to take place. It's not just about the facts and the delivery. That's a piece of it. Coaching and mentoring have always been there, but they're getting a much bigger spotlight shown on them right now. And that's because the power of feedback really is what that session shared.
So let's go to the power of feedback in just a moment here. But I'm just sitting back here thinking about instructors and a skill set. So I think what you're saying is that being a great educator isn't going to be enough. And there's part of education that might be dormant or might be in the individual or might need greater skills, and it has specifically to do with coaching or mentoring, right? Am I hearing you right?
I think it's even to build off that a bit more, it's being a great educator has more to it than the skill set or technical knowledge. That being an educator now is really going to encompass a lot more involvement of that kind of coach role. And being a mentor, it's not something that you necessarily get to be. You actually get invited to be a mentor. And this is something we actually learned from a fantastic guest speaker that was there, a keynote of Clint Pulver, amazing speaker as well. And the idea of being a coach is there to offer support, offer advice, give those suggestions. And through that process of helping someone be successful, you get invited to be a little bit more of that mentor. That individual starts looking more up to you. They start seeking more of your advice, maybe versus someone else. And as an educator, we are going to be taking that role, those types of roles on more now, because they really help us support success. And the unique thing, of course, about success is it's different for everybody. Years ago, traditional success was being able to go into that salon, spa, shop, and get behind the chair or table or booth, whatever it might be. Now everyone defines it so differently that we have to be ready to support everyone's definition of success, because their success is our success.
So I'm an owner, I'm an administrator, I'm at a school, single or multi-location. So what should I be doing about that? I mean, I'm asking the question out of pure curiosity. I mean, how does this become actionable to me as an owner or an administrator? I mean, is it in helping them with skill development or?
I think there's a couple aspects to that. As the owner, the individuals that you're coaching are your educators and your team members. And so their success is also going to be defined differently than maybe other people on your team. And then we're looking at ultimately, whenever you're in that role of coach or mentor, it comes back to the type of feedback that you offer. We've all might have worked for someone or been in a classroom with someone where you kind of received a little bit more of the good job on this, good job on that. And it might have felt great at the moment. And then you sit back and think about, well, what was good about this? There's so many things I just did. What was good? Mindful feedback which is what we start to explore, is how do we really start creating feedback and giving feedback to those that we're coaching that is actionable. And as that owner or director, those that you're coaching, they need actionable items as well. They need feedback that makes them feel good about what they're doing, shows them areas where they can improve, gives them that very specific targeted change related type of feedback, and allows them to know that they actually are able to accomplish it. You know, that's the big part, is many times in feedback, we give the very again, I was going to say the word kind of generic, good job, or we come in very hard and we focus on this is everything that you need to change. There's really a few concepts that we can do to help support all sides of it and make sure that those individuals that are receiving our coaching have the chance to improve and to actually put into practice what we want them to.
You're such an excellent guest. I love this conversation. And now I'm a little torn here because when I hear you speak, it sounds like it's actionable feedback. You use the word mindful feedback, and I think someone might have also light bulb moment, action feedback. So you talk about being mindful feedback, and it's also actionable feedback, if I'm hearing you right, correct?
Well, mindful feedback is actually a series of all of these blends of what our feedback is like. Are we providing them positive feedback? Is it change-based feedback? Is it actionable feedback? Is it specific and measurable feedback? All of these different elements blend into what mindful feedback is. Mindful feedback is mindful of all of those aspects of it, all of these various elements that support that person's growth.
Man, you are taking the word feedback and exploding it. And I'm just reflecting, I mean, how many years I've been in the workforce. I've been in the workforce a long time. And the word feedback comes up, but I've never really unpacked the word. And like you just did, I feel like you should do a whole segment just called feedback, really, because this is a generation that craves feedback and frequency of feedback. Tell me if you agree with this. Frequency of feedback is more important than actually the depth of feedback. So people want it all the time, as opposed to like twice a year having an in-depth feedback session.
It's striking that balance between those. Feedback has to have an opportunity to be conversation-based. So you've got to have the opportunity for depth. But to your point, Tom, it can't just be once a year at the end of the year. And then I have to, as you kind of say, like unpack a year's worth of feedback into now an hour end of year conversation we're going to have. Having feedback happen frequently. Another element of mindful feedback is it needs to be relevant. That means it's got to happen when something can happen with it. If I'm going to give you feedback, you should be able to take it and use it almost immediately, not have to wait for that next opportunity to come up. Less teaching and more feedback equals more learning. And that's not just from an educator to a learner. I think of it as when I was a director myself, when I was able to give meaningful, mindful feedback to my educators, they were then able to go to their learning environments and make immediate change. And that change impacted everything in the organization, from the students and their success. And that ultimately then bred into the school success. If I waited until the end of the year to do that, that moment was missed. So relevance, I would say, is the big key to as far as the frequency.
Tom, how is financial feedback handled mindfully? I love that question. I'm going to come back to that one in a moment. Now, as it relates to feedback, I think feedback's a gift. I really do. And feedback can be scary because vulnerable. And whether you're a director, whether you're an owner or an instructor, learning the art of feedback. And I think you've really addressed feedback probably better than anybody I've worked with in a short amount of time. One of the things that we've learned at Qnity is we have an acronym, and it's the acronym is ACE. It's ACCE. And we use it really to teach how to give, how to connect heart to heart. And one of the things that we found when we did surveys, what do you look for in a coach? And we found two of those words came up the most, which is surprising to me. They want the coach to challenge them, and they want to know that the coach cares, which is a little bit of a push and pull. How do you address feedback as it relates to having challenging conversations?
Again, I'd say that this kind of comes back to how we really structure our feedback. That there's a couple of things, and I'll be very honest, Tom. And when you mentioned like how, unpacking my event and coming back to it, one of the first things that I actually talked about with the team is we came back and we said, the structure, this mindful feedback is fantastic, but what we're missing it is an acronym. And I'm working on that. But one of the biggest things with unpacking this idea of like those difficult conversations is for a learner in their journey where things are always changing. If it comes in too strong, it actually can shut down learning. That if you don't help acknowledge some of the good stuff they are doing, because with it, you've got to acknowledge progress, no matter how big or how small, acknowledging that progress. And every day, learners are making progress. Your team members in your schools and academies, they're making progress. Learning doesn't come without failures. I think everybody knows that. So looking at it, having those difficult conversations, it's all about structuring. One of the biggest things you can do is always start out positive. Feedback should always begin positive because it also just opens someone up to hearing what you have to say a bit.
Kevin asked the question, which he said, Tom, how is financial feedback handled mindfully? And the first thing that comes to me when it comes to financial related feedback, empathy comes to mind for me first. Okay. And I want to throw out a couple things to you and the group here. First of all, research shows that at least 50% of Americans have a form of math anxiety. Now, when you get to money anxiety, which is another percentage of the population, most people are coming into financial related conversations with anxiety before you even say hello. The other thing is to address Kevin's question. In many cases, financial feedback is shared in the form of a spreadsheet. Well, the biggest fan of a spreadsheet is the creator of that particular spreadsheet. So anyway, perhaps we should do a session here on financial feedback. I love the question. This is your show though, and you're the expert on, but I had to ask that question. Now, as it relates to this and how we doing on time here, I've got to be respectful. We're going to do about a 3-minute countdown for you. Okay.
Okay.
Because you were gracious enough to completely rearrange your schedule today. And I appreciate that. Okay.
I'm here for you. I've definitely got some more time, and I'm enjoying this conversation just as much. So I can sacrifice a few other things for you today.
All right. So you talked about a journey of learning and coaching and success. You also talked about the whole coaching and mentoring, and not just standing in front of the room and spilling the facts. Let's spend a little bit more time talking about the whole coaching and mentoring, and that being a necessary skill set going forward.
Yeah. So there's a couple of things that I'd like to just branch off with that one. For the educators, of course, it's understanding that in that role, and again, being mindful as owners, managers, directors that are going to be on this call, is understanding that the educators have this kind of time frame where they're having to shift focus a bit from being very kind of mindful themselves of this is all the information I have to get across. This is all of the demonstrations I have to do. And also being able to support our educators and being able to let some of those tasks go to the tools we have to support us, our online platforms, our education materials, the resources and the videos that can definitely help out. And as I mentioned earlier, supporting them doing the human side of education. And that's the feedback, and that's the coaching and the mentoring that goes with that. So when we look at this shift and that kind of taking place, it really is from the owner and educator perspective is we have to be prepared to support our educators going through that transition. And it's only going to prove beneficial and positive to us that if we can really become a culture and environment that, again, truly embrace learning with all of the ups and downs that go with it, all of the positives and sometimes the failures and stumbles that go with it, but being able to develop a culture that can support everybody, developing coaches, knowing how they can transition into that mentorship and really offering that type of support and the feedback that we offer. A lot of it comes down to sometimes mirroring too. The type of feedback that our educators might offer is also going to be impacted by the type of feedback that they receive.
So one of the things that you and I spoke about and was the financial aspects of this. And you were pretty quick to point out that that's not necessarily part of what your presentation was. And it's really my job to say, how does this really relate with financially? And to me, thinking out loud here, certainly from a financial matter, moving to more of this permanent hybrid model, which used to be, strictly in person, then it was all virtual. Now it's hybrid. I've got to think that's favorable to the financial model once the initial investments are made. That's my first comment. The other thing is, as it relates to a financial model, from an investment standpoint, investing in your team, investing in some of the skills that you're suggesting, feedback related, coaching and mentoring, will have a financial impact in terms of, so it's really prioritizing your education spend. Those are the things that come to mind. Maybe some of our guests have some other thoughts about how this relates to financially, but you and I didn't necessarily talk about this very much. I had to make that point though. So
yeah, if I could build off that, when you mentioned math anxiety and financial anxiety, I am up at the top of that scale. So I am not going to try to pretend to be a financial expert on costs and exchanges. But what I will say is, from my experience, again, in my academies and my classrooms, is what I've been able to start leveraging virtual opportunities for, technology opportunities for, has allowed me to also offset some of the things that cost me very cold, hard money for my classroom, that I was able to start to not necessarily just always increase, but I was starting to see an exchange, that there's certain resources I didn't need to spend money on because now they're available through other means, other resources. From the financial aspect of investing in educators and teams, I be quite honest, I'm one that always doesn't see that money go to waste. I think that if we want to develop our academies, if we want to develop our culture, that is an investment in our people. And that's something that I always find comes back when invested well. And there's so many resources that are out there. And of course, if I didn't do a little bit of a plug for it, that, Pivot Point, we offer, as you can see, the Transform, the coaching in creative classrooms, like those type of sessions are definitely out there, and only help those people grow. And as our people grow, our culture grows.
I'm going to ask you a thought-provoking question. This will be my last question for you, I think. All right. What question didn't I ask you today that I should have?
Now that's a question that if I were to say, if there's one question that you didn't ask me that you should have, is how is it that you realize it's not just up to one person to make change happen? How is it that you actually, I've been mentioning this idea of culture so much, that is one of the biggest parts that can impact, I think, a school business in general. And it's that culture aspect. And if I were to give you just a little bit of that tease, that answer for right now, in hopes maybe you get me back for a roundtable part 2, is that culture, it's all about the people. And it's not just a person. It's not just the one person. It's not the person with the placard or the tag or the desk. It's about the people. And culture is what really, I think, has one of the biggest impacts in what we do in our industries.
Pretty good answer. I've actually not asked that question before in one of these roundtables, but I'm going to start asking it more often. That's a really great answer.
Told you I was ready for a curveball. So
you were indeed. Now, the other curveball is I did not know that you were in Carolina, because I was thinking about having dinner with you, Aaron, and myself. Aaron's vegan, so no steak, but I would probably join you for a little. But you're down in North Carolina, is that correct?
I am. I live in Charlotte, North Carolina, originally from Chicago, but I had to escape the snow a few years ago. So
you're not the Lone Ranger. Tell me, I'm just really curious. We're going to hang out. You have a family. Tell us a little bit about what else you like to do.
I do. I'll actually tell you that my family is one of my biggest inspirations for me. I do have a few young kids, all in elementary school. And for me right now, I'll tell you, they're such a huge inspiration because I get an opportunity to see what they're going through. And that helps me understand in the role that I serve of what does that potentially mean for the future of learning. The experience I've got, my youngest are in 4th grade. My oldest is in 7th grade. What they're going through now is an entirely different world of learning than I ever experienced, and what my parents or grandparents experienced. And a lot of stepping stones for education have been established over the years. And we're having to really look at, are there other paths that we can take, other opportunities that we can explore? And my kids are my biggest inspiration. My wife is my biggest support. She's my rock and keeps me grounded and also allows me to do what I do. And outside of that, I also will completely acknowledge I'm a very big tech junkie. I absolutely love technology. I think there's so much power in it. And I love that I get the opportunity to blend that with my love for learning. I absolutely love everything about education. It's been one of my very first journeys when I started this industry.
Yeah, it clearly comes through for sure. Here's another curveball for you. So as you look at your kids, growing up, I never received any financial literacy training. You know, it isn't like I learned it in high school. I kind of learned on my own. How great you think it will be for your kids to be able to go through a money skills course to set them up. So this is a little bit of a segue into the money course.
All of my kids have these plans of what they want to spend their money on. And I've already got myself a nice, Money by Qnity path set up to help take them through it. I don't say that sarcastically. I absolutely have taken a look at those lessons and said, this is something I need to get my kids involved in, because you're right, I did not have great, the biggest thing that I can remember, and she'd hate me for saying it, but my mom and like always worrying about balancing the checkbook. And so my immediate concern once I got my money was all about this. I just need to keep track of it in a checkbook. And I didn't do a good job at that because I also didn't have a really good understanding of money itself. And that's something that I want to be able to pass on to my kids. And I 100% can tell you there are lessons in Money by Qnity that I am already prepared to start setting up my preteen, so he knows what to go into once he starts picking up some of his first jobs and stuff.
Bravo. Hey, thanks for allowing me to throw a few different angles at you today. And you're a great guest. I want to formally award to you the $1 Million light bulb and an entry into the official Brain Trust. Let's everybody give Daniel a virtual round of applause. Give him a little shout out in the chat there too. Great job. Thank you, Daniel. Great session. I'm absolutely going to have you back. And when you get your feedback acronym or whatever's next for you, I'm going to have you back on as a guest so darn fast. I actually want to invite you on the Salon Roundtable too. I think this is really important stuff that everybody needs to hear. So thank you.
It'd be a pleasure. Thank you, Tom, for this opportunity. I've thoroughly enjoyed it.
All right. I've got a couple other things to go through. Daniel, if you need to terminate because you need to be in another meeting, you officially have permission, not that you need it anyway. Or you're welcome to stick around. I probably have about 5 more minutes to go here, but outstanding job. Please give this guy the proper credit that he deserves. And I've got some other things I want to share with you guys. So we have talked a little bit about our money course, and I want to give you a little more information about that today, not in the sense of promotion or anything like that, but to give you a little bit of education. And here is a reminder, there's a call to action on August 23rd, 3 p.m. Aaron and I will be doing a session that will be a 45-minute session about the program. The website's Qnity for Schools. This is an example of one of our educators and what some of the graphics look like, but I just want to take a moment. That's Aaron, by the way. Aaron is one of 8 guides, and on the screen, we actually have the names of the modules: mindset, money in, money out, borrowed, saved, plan. And then the last one is money success. And that was the one that Aaron did. So certainly we teach things like how to understand your paycheck, breaking it down, student loans, credit ratings. It's all motion graphics. It's fun. It's interesting. But what I want to do is I want to spend just a moment and go through the first module with you. And maybe it will stimulate to you some of the things that I feel are so important to teach. And we actually start out the whole program with a concept called there's money in the middle. And what we mean by that is we go to school to learn a craft. Whether the craft is hairdressing, whether it's barbering, whether it's styling, whether it's nails, whether it's aesthetics, massage, we're learning a craft, personal training, accounting, whatever. And it's great to learn a craft, but what we need to do is not just learn the craft, we need to learn the craft and money skills. And so money in the middle teaches replace or for and. I can't tell you how many times, and the stigma out there that, hey, if I focus on money and making money and being successful financially, my craft is going to change, or I'm going to compromise myself as an artist. So it's about replacing the word or for and. So have great craft and money skills. We also go through what's prosperity, success principles. The second module, we teach the 9 grid. You're actually looking at a 9 grid. We've actually won a National Graphic Design Award for this unique visual thinking tool called the 9 grid. So we teach about the 9 grid because that's used throughout the program. And then now we're getting to some of the things that really put students in the right frame of mind as they create a course. And these are certain myths and traps. One of them is the I just want to trap. I just want to do hair. I just want to do massage. And that is a trap. And I've got stories about the I want to trap. The other thing is words don't matter. And this is stressing the importance of financial literacy, the terminology. Another myth is that you have to be good at math to be good at money. You know, I was a CPA for 14 years, probably 25,000 hours as a practicing accountant. I was average at math skills. You don't actually need to be super great. You do need to be with statistics and analysis, but you don't need to be great at math to be good with money. Another myth is you have to choose between your craft or money. You don't have to choose. And featuring stories of people that excel at both are awesome. Another myth is being at your craft is good enough. Say if I do great hair, if I do great nails or whatever, then everything will take care of itself. That's just not true. The other thing is focusing on money will cramp your style. So these are all myths and traps that we spend time debunking. The other thing is avoiding, this is a big one, avoiding money issues will make them go away. And then the next thing is it's not important right now. Well, it's important to get into really good habits. Lesson number 4 is really powerful. We know that money is not the number one motivator for most. But as we start out these sessions on money is the most important thing, but it is like oxygen. And what we have to do is find out what someone's why is. For example, Daniel, growing up and in his career, he's had whys. And I don't know what his why is. I'm going to guess right now his biggest why is probably family, his loved ones. But we really allow the student to determine, what's important. They want to be financially independent. They want to be free from worry. They want to be able to take care of loved ones. They want to travel or have experiences, personal expression with creativity, quality of life, given an impact or future. So these are some of the common whys. And then finally, and this is the last lesson in the first module, each module has 5 lessons, is money stories. And here's the deal with money stories. All of us have money stories. Daniel shared money stories that he had with his mother. And I'm not saying Daniel's was a negative story, but what I do know is that many money stories that we have are negative. And part of that just has to do with how we're wired as humans, the amygdala part of the brain. We tend to attach with the more negative. So part of what we want to do is we want to inspire people with better money stories. And we go through that, there's negative money stories and there's positive, and you can determine what money story you want to pay attention to. And then we also go through actionable ways to change your money story, to put yourself in a position that you can be great at your craft, whatever your craft is, and you can be great with money. So anyway, that's module number 1 from our money course. Very, very quick. It doesn't do justice to the visuals around it and the engagement, but it really addresses number 1, what is your money mindset before we get into technical stuff like savings and debt and spending and all that kind of stuff. So anyway, join us for our session on the 23rd. We hope you become a money school. Closing thoughts. I got to tell you, I love this session with Daniel today. It just, I like to have a posture of curiosity, and Daniel allowed me to do that. And I love this quote. In fact, I'll end with this quote by Oliver Wendell Holmes. And that is, a mind stretched never returns to its original form. So Daniel, thank you for stretching our minds, because it will never be the same as a result of what you taught us today. And I want to thank all of you for being with us. We will be on next week. We'll be on next week, and we will love to spend more time with you. Michael, thanks for joining us today. I'm going to see who else is on joining us today. We've got Andrea, Ann, Caitlin, Christine, Chrissy, Diane, Jamie, Janet, Jared, Jeffrey, Kevin, Lori, Lisa, Matt, Michael, Nicole, Sabina, Sale, and Terry. So thanks for joining us, everybody. Hopefully you can join us on Monday, the 23rd, for something on the money, for a session on the money course. And with that, we'll call it a wrap. Thanks again, guys. And I hope you have a great next week. Bye now.